Hello, and welcome back to this discussion overviewing the fluent-data library in JavaScript. In previous videos, we went over the dataset class defined on it. In this video, we're going to turn our attention to the matrix class. We'll instantiate it using a couple of methods, and we'll go over just some of the methods defined on it. The core functionality will be in the next video. This is a remake, so if you're interested in keeping the intended order, mind the video titles or the playlist order. Don't go by the upload order. To get started, we're going to do as we did with the dataset. We're going to consult the wiki, and we're going to take one of the examples. We're going to plop it into our demo here. If you're actually coding with us at home, notice that I've changed the dataset.js file to a matrix.js file. For the first instantiation, let's actually not use this array quite yet. I'm going to show you how to instantiate a matrix as though you were typing it in manually. You would do this for very simple matrices. So there's our fluent-data library, put into a double $sign variable, as you can see up here. And there is a matrix method defined on it, and it is a class, which is why we have the new keyword in front. What you want to pass as the first parameter is an array of arrays. We're going to just do a simple one here. We're going to log that to the console. There is a log method on the matrix class, just like there is on the dataset class. It works the same way. If you want to pass an optional first parameter, that's a query selector. You can point it to a div or some other HTML element, and it'll append to the inner HTML. Second parameter would be a caption. Third parameter can either be a rounding number, a rounding multiplier, or it can be a function. The function might work differently. Consult the wiki on the function if you want it to map out your results to look a little different than what's really in there. Here we're just going to use the default, then output it to the console. And there it is, visually represented. Generic column and row names though. Let's say we wanted to change those. We can use set row names, and there is a set column names. Actually, let's do row 0 and row 1. Notice that the row and column indices are 0 and 1 instead of 1 and 2. This may be different than what you're used to if you work with matrices in other languages. But since JavaScript array is a 0-based index, and in other areas it's 0-based, we'll stick with that when we work with matrices. And you'll see our set row names did in fact rename our rows. Now let's instantiate with the community array. We could, if we desired, just pass in the community array, and we'd have to map appropriately with a matrix function. But we're going to do it a little bit differently to take advantage of some conveniences here, and to make it look a little bit more elegant, at least as far as typing goes. So performance permitting, what you can do is first set up the community array as a data set. For an array this small, that's probably just fine. If you got a huge 1,000-element array, maybe it'll start impacting your performance, and so you want to instantiate using a matrix directly. But here there are some advantages to doing it this way. So this first line here, we're turning the community array into a data set first, and then what we're going to do is going to call the matrix method defined on it. This is not the matrix method defined on the fluent-data library. At the top level, this is defined on the data set. Here it knows what data is your source data. It's the data set itself. And what you can do is pass in a function. Here we're going to set the parameter to C because the source is a community array. But that's the rows. And we're going to return an array. And we're going to output this X and Y properties. Let's log that. And there it is. There's a matrix now created from our X and Y properties. But notice the generic row and column names as expected. We could just set the row names here. We can do a set row names, and it accepts a function, so we can pass the community array and map to point to the marker property and output that. But you can imagine that doesn't look too great. So what we can do instead is just use a CSV syntax that points to the properties you want in the data set. That itself is just much more economical visually and as far as typing goes. But it has another advantage. It names your columns for you. Notice before it was C0, C1, now it's X and Y. So you did two things in one step. The second parameter is optional, but you can set your row names. Again, you can use the function if you wanted, or you can just have a string pointing to the property that has your row names. And now with a very clean looking syntax, we've created our matrix, set our row names and column names automatically. What's a matrix look like? It looks as you would expect. It's an object with an array of column names, an array of row names, and data that has a nested structure, a nested array structure. With a data set, if you wanted to work with data, you would use a get method. There used to be a get method defined on the matrix, but it really was more analogous to a filter method, and so it was renamed appropriately. It's actually why I remade this video, because I decided to change that. If you just want to work with the data for some reason, just point to the data property. It's stable. Unlike a data set, it will always be a nested structure. If for some reason it could be a generator in the future, I'll probably build a get method, but I don't anticipate doing that. I do want to show that filter method. The first parameter will be your row filter. It can be a function, it can be a scalar value, it can be an array. Let's start with an array. Let's say we wanted the first two rows. Just pass in the indices. Let's say we wanted just the first row. You can pass in a scalar. Let's say you wanted everything but the second row. Just do a -1. There we go. The second row was Orangewood School, and I don't see it in there. Well, what do you do for the first row? Can you have a -0? Wouldn't it just turn into 0? Actually, JavaScript recognizes a -0. Other languages do. It's a computer thing. And so we take advantage. No Applewood Park. It could be a function. The function will have the parameter being the index, the row index. So let's say we wanted every row with index less than or equal 3. That should give us the first 4 rows. There we go, our first 4. Second parameter is your column names. So let's say we just wanted the first column, that would be column 0. And if we wanted to only worry about columns, we can pass null or undefined to the first. And one last thing to mention is, let's say we wanted to flip the order. Just flip it in your index, and it'll come out in that order. See, now it's Y and X. So that's the basics of working with a matrix. We'll get into some of the core methods in the next video.